welcome to the Painted Bride Quarterly Slush Pile. This is one of the best things we do. What it is an editorial meeting that we record for you in which we discuss submissions to the Painted Bride Quarterly after asking permission from the author to do so. And one person in the person that's speaking right now is me, Kathleen Volkmiller. Hello. And I'm in Philadelphia in the studio. And loyal Slushies will know that I'm very, very excited to say Marion is right here on my right-hand side and we can hold hands.
Woohoo, woohoo. And we're wearing matching long blue, sexy, tunic-y tops today.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what Jason's wearing, but it's a long blue tunic top. That's the theme of today's episode.
It's foggy and cold outside.
Exactly.
We decided to dress to the weather. So hi, Marion. She's still here on break, and it's really amazing and lovely to be with you.
Yes, I'm so pleased to sit across the table from you and have you actually in my eyeballs, and what a treat it was last night to be at the Black Sheep reading, and I got to see and listen to poets Blanche Brown, Kevin Waters, and John Todd. They were amazing, and this wonderful description of the Black Sheep series as a reading series for writers.
Yeah.
That's what PBQ is doing at that series. Like, that's going to stay with me for a while because it's really true.
It was really nice. One of the readers said that she liked that was what our series was about.
Yeah.
It was terrific.
Very cool.
That's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So they see what we're doing.
Yeah, I think they do. Yeah. So, high voice, disembodied voice.
Possibly wearing a blue tunic in New York.
Oh, no, I'm actually wearing a Buffy sweatshirt. I'm actually wearing my Sunnydale sweatshirt because I'm double parked. I think the most important fact about me today is that I'm double parked right now.
Okay, that's noted. Well noted. Shall we call the parking authority on your behalf?
You shall not, because it's sort of okay because of alternate sided street parking. We have a kind of like necessarily double park during alternate sided street parking, but I don't live in a neighborhood where you have to be in your car. If I were in Park Slope, I would have to actually be in my jammies in my car, but because I'm in Bed-Stuy, I can listen and move the car if someone honks. But the etiquette changes from neighborhood to neighborhood.
That is so crazy if someone honks. So you're going to have a percent of your eardrum pointed to the window.
At all times.
Right?
So we will listen in this podcast for the background honking. And make sure that you're okay. All right. We're linked arms in solidarity. That's awesome.
Well, we are a very small group today, but we're very excited that we have 3 terrific poems to look at from Natasha Sajé. And I guess we should just roll right in, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it.
Right. Marion, you mentioned that you want to read
can I want to read
please.
The first one. And I also want to say I had such fun corresponding with Natasha Sajé. And I mentioned this to Kathy and to Jason. I just want to say it again, a sort of apology, because I kept addressing her in emails as Dear Sajé, because I finally learned how to put accents over letters through Microsoft and was so entranced with that function and in love with the sound of her last name. I apologize, Natasha. So Natasha Sajé, Dear Utah. State in which I have lived longer than any other, state of my discontent. Horace said, skies change, souls don't. Although like most, I blame anything but myself. You are the place where I moved for work and the place I've complained about for 1/3 of my life. The locus I'm trapped in, an aging otter in an arid zoo. You are my theremin, vibrations and tremors I feel without touch. Sometimes a flyover sense of being left alone, even though the bank teller calls me by my first name. We Utahns wear jeans to the symphony and use family as an excuse for not showing up. We drive streets wider than highways while the blessed call the shots, where 1 in 5 carry a gun. I roll my eyes at special rings and garments that mark me as having no ward. You are the state I must explain. Watery beer or restaurants close to schools without liquor. You are also the state where I'm never lost. You are over the top mountains, breathlessly close, craggy gray, rock brown hilled in summer, whiter than my teeth in winter, green in May before drought. Always tell me where and when I am. Along with the copper mine, one can see from space, the salt lake too shallow to swim, the townhouses jammed into crevices, a valley like trilobites procreating frantically in a tide pool, while humans are edged by wilderness where elk, coyotes, moose, and mountain lions, and no mosquitoes, no mold, roam. Oh, Utah, you're a kinky rectangle and I'm a pear, wasted on a December tree. We're both queer as cupcakes, except you pretend you're white bread.
Hell yeah to those last
excellent
lines.
Reading.
Sorry, Jason, we stepped right on each other, but I think we're saying the same thing.
What did you say?
I said, hell yeah to those last two lines. What did you say?
Gorgeous, right?
Yeah.
Kinky rectangle.
And I'm a pear wasted on a December tree. That's great.
Yeah, good stuff.
And I love the O, like just that O is so sort of like, it's so, what is it? It's brilliant. It's wonderful. But I'm not being descriptive. No, but I love that O of the address because it's a video, it's a sort of like classical moment, but, here it's so beautiful. And you've gotten to know her Utah so well by the end.
Yeah.
But it's kind of tongue in cheek, but kind of sincere at the same time. That tension of like, oh, Utah.
Well, it's funny because it also sort of like ties back to we Utahns, right? Which is both like fun in my eye and fun to say out loud, right? I didn't know if my mouth was going to let me say it. But the we becomes the I, becomes the I, becomes the O in the flow of the poem, which is really, really pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love You Are My Theremin.
Right. Not
Right,
a word I often see, right?
Trevor's. Yeah. I just, have you ever played a theremin?
I have not, but can you make the sound of a theremin? And
You certainly can.
That's the highlight of 2020.
That was theremin. I was actually there's a recording of Satie's Je ne pedi on a theremin that they play on the radio all the time here. But yeah, if you've never played a theremin, like it's just it's an electronic instrument and you just wave your hand in the space.
Right.
And there's a vertical and a horizontal sensor that makes the sound based on where your hand is.
Right.
And it's like the creepiest thing in the world. It's like watching someone do magic. Like it's not like watching someone play like a violin. It's just like you're just waving your head. It's like, one of those things where it's reading your brain. It's amazing.
So I think
I love that idea of, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just love that image. Like, I love the actual image of how to play a theremin because honestly, I've always had the image of someone playing the saw, right? And I know it's completely wrong.
It sounds very similar.
But the sounds are similar, right? I never understood the mechanism for it though. So thank you.
I think, don't they often have them in museums and children's museums?
They do, especially children's museums. Yeah. They have one on sale at the museum store at the Whitney.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Sort of like if you come to the Whitney, I'll take you to play the theremen.
And
we'll ask Natasha Sajé to come as well.
Yes. But,
she's totally welcome. Yeah, we can bring her along. But it's just a beautiful image. The way that it's sort of like you're making the music inside of it, but also like you just have to sense it, that there's no kind of like the changes are kind of electric in this kind of invisible field. And I like the flyover sense of being left alone.
Yeah.
I mean, there's such an interesting, you rarely see this where someone is treating something as simultaneously exotic and intimate. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That usually, like, we either see someone who's like, oh, this place I've never been before, how strange you are. Or, like, oh, place where I live, how familiar you are. But this combination, this kind of explanation of sort of having fallen into this place that remains strange, but is now so familiar. I was impressed. That's like, That's hard to pull off.
And it points back to the opening gambit too, right? The sort of, the state in which I have lived longer than any other state of my discontent. And then the invocation of Horus, right? Skies change, souls don't. There's a way, and when the poem then moves into the sort of physical description of the geography and topography, right? Like you get a sense that the solidity of the place, but that even the landscape, the sort of changing landscape, the seasonal changes, the sort of scale of the place and the sort of quotidian daily particulars of the place are all combining in this little symphony that she's rocking.
I think Jason already mentioned the first half of it. Sometimes a flyover sense of being left alone, even though the bank teller calls me by my first name.
Yeah.
Like that epitomizes the whole thing, right? That's right.
Right. And also the way that it shifts. I mean, a lot of the stuff in the middle is, Mormon, the special rings and garments and wards. And, but I love that it moves into that following we Utahns, that she claims herself into it, right? She wears jeans to the symphony now too, and also uses family. But then there are these other ways in which there's this kind of community that she's not a part of that's super central.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, how cool, right? That's sort of threading that needle of being an insider and an outsider, right? Mm-hmm. Like both, as you said, it's the Jason intimacy and exoticism, and the sort of rich description is the way of getting at that. Description is the way she's getting at that feeling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you guys think of Dear Utah, comma? The address in the title, even to make it look even more like a letter.
Yeah, I kind of dig that because it's telling me how to read the thing, right? From just in the comma, it's a salutation.
Yeah,
right? That's what it's called, right?
Yeah,
okay.
I like the comma.
Yeah,
I do too.
And also, I think it's legit. I mean, I think that it's not sometimes what's that thing where someone is writing a poem and they're like, "Oh, Father, for the third time after you left me on the this and the that and that," and you're like, they know that, there's sort of something where a lot of times if you have a direct address, you have to be careful about, giving the addressee information they already know because it feels artificial. But here it feels kind of lofty. It's a sort of performative.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the letter kind of, the comma makes it a legitimate letter, but also kind of leaves open that because Utah isn't actually a person, right? You can't actually write a letter to Utah. You can, but only if you're Mitt Romney.
Utah won't read it. That's the problem.
Yeah, Utah won't read it.
What do you guys think?
I think we might be ready to vote. Natasha Sajé.
Yeah.
Dear Utah. And I get to vote with my actual thumb.
Actually,
I'm so jealous.
My actual thumb is in the studio. Get ready.
My thumbs are crying. My thumbs are why can't we be in the studio?
That's a really lovely image, right? You're vigilantly on parking standby with crying thumbs.
We should have planned more better, because he could have come down last night, been at the room
you could have slept over. We had a slumber party. Yeah.
Oh, I would love to. Although I just got back from Warren Wilson. I've been traveling.
Oh, right.
In North Carolina, and that was super intense. It was wonderful. It was really, really wonderful. But yeah, I need to recuperate.
Yeah.
I need some rest.
Marion and I slept with Marion last night, and I just told everyone. Sorry, Marion.
As it happens, world.
At the Warwick, and her bed was so huge that you could have slept in the middle, and we still would have not accidentally touched all evening.
One, perfectly well that if we were all in bed all night together, I would have totally been cuddling.
Oh my God, we would have just been spooning for sure. Yeah. All right. Wait. So let's focus on Dear Utah.
Yes,
right. So back to the poem. Get your theremins ready. 1, 2, 3.
Vote. And it's unanimous. Woo-hoo! Thank you, Natasha Sajé.
Can I say yay, Natasha Sajé?
Well, you just did.
I just did.
I guess you can.
I can.
Jason, I'm gonna since there are the three of us and the three poems, you can choose between the next two.
All right.
Dear Caitlyn Jenner is up next.
I'm going to do Is Homosexuality Contagious?
You want to do that one? Okay, so then I'm doing Dear Caitlyn Jenner.
Okay.
All right.
Is homosexuality contagious? Like where you touch a doorknob and then wipe your eye and 2 days later you have a scratchy throat? Or a restaurant patron seeing baked Alaska at another table flaunt its frosted heat, tender cake under cold fruity creaminess and fluffy mountains of meringue? You've heard of it. You're born that way. Either liking women or men or both and in between or neither, or not knowing or at least not knowing yet or wanting to know or not. Watch the person move the spoon into the mound. The Romans. Look what happened to them. Mike Pence calls his wife mother. Hear a faint smack of lips. Their daughter wrote a story about a rabbit based on Marlon Brando. If we're talking animals, recall the 2 male penguins who raised an orphan chick, or the half female, half male cardinal. You could see the split. That's genetic. Abominations, etc. Can we blame Augustine, who thought he could live without a body and wanted everyone else to do the same? Yada, 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 which means new in Hebrew, or to show mercy. Each of us has things we must turn away from. Look, but don't touch. Think, but don't act. Don't think too hard, actually. Feel. No, don't feel. The whole room orders the flaming thing. Were you in the restaurant in the first place? Because you weren't really hungry, were you? Oh, I messed up the last line. Sorry. Why were you in the restaurant in the first place? Because you weren't really hungry, were you?
Nice. Thank you.
Nice.
I really like this.
Oh, wow. What a great reading, too.
Whew.
Right. Okay. So the third, I'm stammering here because I'm going to say the third stanza, but the way the poem looks on the page is almost like this sort of blown open prose piece. But it is obviously a poem. So Slushies, when you get a chance, take a look at the show notes and look at how this lays out. And that third stanza, you're born that way, either liking women or men or both and in between or neither, or not knowing, or at least not knowing yet, or wanting to know or not. There's such a musicality in the way those pieces fall and tumble into the logic of that chunk. It's lovely, like really lovely. And I, how would you guys describe like the tone or the point of view here? Because it's capturing like both an interiority but an address as well, right? Like so that the question is posed, to the reader or to some implied audience, right? Right. But then it has this sort of address and an interiority simultaneously, which is really cool.
Right. Because sometimes the you feels like the I. Feels like an I.
Right. And the address, like think but don't act, don't think too hard, actually feel, no, don't feel, right? Like it's doing this doubleness of I'm talking to you and simultaneously talking to myself, right? So...
Well, and also I think like the image of the baked Alaska.
Yeah.
Right. Like, because there's 2 versions of Contagion, right? One version of Contagion is the one that we sort of get from the right wing, where someone's like, oh, you've been infected and now it's taken you over. And, it's a kind of illness or a sickness that you need to be quarantined from. But the second is a kind of like, oh, that looks fun.
Exactly.
Like I hadn't known that was something that I was interested in. But now that I know it exists, I think that's actually what I want to do. And so that idea that you have options.
Yeah.
Right. That like, I mean, I know we'll get to the Caitlyn Jenner poem in a moment, but like one of the sort of the TERF objections to transgender identity, TERF being trans exclusionary radical feminists. So like if you're reading Sheila Jeffries, who's a TERF, who's a trans exclusionary radical feminist, she hates transgender people or I shouldn't say she hates transgender people, but she doesn't think it's a real identity. And her distinction is that transgender people often realize transgender identity as a possibility based on television, whereas she insists that sort of lesbians just know, which is not true. Like, I mean, I know so many lesbians who read Adrienne Rich's The Lesbian Continuum and were like, oh, okay, that's a possibility. And so this idea that, there might be something wrong by realizing that something is an option and then wanting it, the way she's taking that on, I think, is really, really smart. And so it's sort of short-circuiting a certain kind of attack that certain kinds of right-wing people make on homosexuals or gay people or lesbians, by existing in two versions of what contagion might mean, or two versions of what, a radiant possibility for identity would be. I'm sorry, I'm being a little incoherent this morning.
But I love that radiant possibility for identity really does capture like that sense of contagion as also like the spread of desire, right? Or like desiring what's being desired at the table next to you, right? And in a way, the taste becomes the practice or the possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
And I'll say I do know Natasha Sajé's work, and I do know her history, and some of it's public. It's been in the New York Times, but she was married to a man who passed away, and now she's with a woman. So there's also a way in which, like, I come into this knowing that Sajé didn't think, when she says or neither, or not knowing, or at least not yet, or wanting to know or not, that has a different valence for me than it might if I were just reading the poem as a kind of like isolated, with no background knowledge of who Natasha Sajé is.
Right.
Can we talk about the Baked Alaska itself for a couple minutes?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm having a really rudimentary, basic read of one of the reasons why it's the image. Mm-hmm. But I would love to hear what you guys think of why Baked Alaska.
Why Baked Alaska?
Okay, I'll say my rudimentary reading.
Please do.
Baked Alaska is both things. It's hot and cold. It's several sensations at once. You know what I mean? It's and so I think it makes sense in this piece for that reason. Yeah. And then there might be something about, I don't know, the show-offiness of it, the extra fancy of it. Or
Oh, absolutely. Like if someone else gets Baked Alaska, you like see it. It's like someone else having a birthday. I mean, there's this massive flaming thing. Right. Although I will say the time this happened to me when I was like, oh, Baked Alaska, I want that. I was like, oh, this just tastes burnt. I do not like this at all.
There was a minute that my mom actually made Baked Alaska on special holidays. It was like, I guess it was a challenge for her. Really? And we actually had Baked Alaska at home a few times.
All right. So
it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think she was testing herself.
Like that's a.
I'm going to confess to my hidden injuries of class here. I've heard the phrase. I don't think I've ever seen a Baked Alaska.
Really? In real life?
No, I'm thinking of that. Like
we're going to have to find that.
I know. We're going to have to
Alaska.
We're going to YouTube Baked Alaska.
Oh no, Joe's on it.
It's like a meringue.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Like a meringue. See, you serve it flambé.
Right. That's
so when
cake.
It comes to the table, the entire thing is on fire.
Right.
And then you blow it out.
That's cake.
And then it's kind of charred.
Then meringue, and then they torch it, and that's what browns the meringue. But it's
kind of like a fancy s'more.
All right. We are so going to include that image on show notes.
We have to find a Baked Alaska, though, in real life, too, and order it.
All right. That's the goal. That's the immediate goal is to eat one of those. But the long-term goal, right, is thinking about the way that image functions, even for somebody like me who's never actually tasted one, right? Or I couldn't actually conjure the image, but her description of it, right, does the work of what you just said, both of you, right? Like it's the spectacle at the table next door. Everybody's sort of looking at it, and it's beautiful, and it's got this combination of taste. It's cold, it's hot, it's sweet.
Yeah, several textures.
All the things are happening, right? But it takes some boldness to both create and deliver it, and also boldness to order it, right? So it really is like this theater of sensation, like the theater of taste and desire and consumption. So very cool.
So how does that showiness play in the poem, though? That's the one thing I'm missing. That's actually what I was hoping for you to talk about. Is that part of why it's Baked Alaska? The performance and theater and all of that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'll go with like it's a pride parade. Like the Baked Alaska is a giant drag queen on a float.
Right. Well, and maybe I said the word.
I mean, there is.
I was just going to say performance, right? People perform their gender that they perform their gender, right? We all do.
in gender performativity, like Butler's idea is that you're endlessly reproducing a kind of template that has no original. Like the performativity, like gender performativity in the 90s, as understood, was very much about, it wasn't voluntaristic. It wasn't like you choose to do this. It was like you're kind of inside of this field that you're engaged with. Right. It wasn't like, because a lot of times performativity is confused for voluntarism. Like you perform it in the sense that you decide what to put on. And like, that's actually the opposite of what like gender performativity theory was about.
Huh. Okay, wait. Because my understanding too is about like, what's that line? It's Butler. She's been being a lesbian since she was 16 or something like that, right? And it's that phrasing, the been being, that captures performativity, right? But I think I love that distinction you're drawing, though, Jason, about choice too, right? Because the been being is like, you're always already in this field of like power and presence and performing the self thusly, right? Yeah. Interesting.
But I think that part of what I like about this poem is that it is kind of pushing back on that. And it is kind of saying, like, not exactly that it's a choice, but that it's something you might try or not try, depending on circumstance. And that the people who are telling you not to try it, like Mike Pence, is weird, calling his wife mother. And then, the Marlon Brando, Stephen Colbert wrote the book about Marlon Brando being a gay bunny.
This is Joe here. Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Can we make a t-shirt that just says Mike Pence is weird?
That might be the title of the episode.
I mean, because he's just the weirdest.
The image is a baked Alaska and the title is Mike Pence is weird.
We can call the episode Mike Pence is weird.
Done. All right, decided. Fantastic.
But I'm sorry. I feel like we're not talking about the craft of the poem. I feel like I'm taking us down like all these roads of like queer theory.
But hang on though. I do want to like sort of like loop all that together, which is to say there's like multiple contexts here, right? One is the context of Jason, what you bring about Natasha Sajé's background to the poem, right? And then plus the poem activates what the reader may or may not know about gender performativity, queer theory, right? And that's functioning as a context as well, right? And so Slushies as editors, like you're hearing it, like this is what we do when we sit with a piece. It's so much of what we bring to it is in play at all times, right? And so that the poem is activating these things and then weighing, right? How the poem is in conversation, right, with these concepts and ideas, and then how what we bring to the poem helps us assess it, right? So the fact that Jason brings this knowledge about Sajé's background, right, like how does it help you assess this poem? But then the bigger question too is like, how does that work for editors? Like when you know a poet's work, right, and then here it is in the slush pile, what are you bringing to the editorial conversation that's distinctive? Right. Yeah.
But I really love the lines. I mean, I love the sort of way it sort of like works for these kind of like slightly prosier blocks.
Yeah.
And the kind of associationalness of them, that it sort of like works as a kind of argument, or a kind of lyric, almost as like a lyric essay.
Yep.
And I love that yada, yada, yada means new in Hebrew. I never heard that.
That's great.
Fascinating.
And, I know we try not to sort of juxtapose or compare the two poems, right? But I do love seeing the range here, right?
Yeah.
And the first poem is really, in the direct address is relying on description, right? To convey the ideas of the poem. And in this, it's like you get the image, you get description, but it does function more like an essay in a way that the first poem, and which is sort of cool. Like here we see these different forms. The epistolary, I can't say that word. Epistolary.
Yeah. No, I can't say it either, apparently.
Epistolary poem, right? And then here the more, the lyric essay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's time to vote.
Oh, yes. Let's do it.
All right.
Cue the baked Alaska.
Let's get on to the vote.
All right. 1, 2, 3.
Flip thumbs. And it's in. Woohoo, woohoo.
Yay.
No dramatic tension.
Yay.
Folks, that's 2 for 2.
2 for 2.
All right.
And now we are on to the longest. It's another letter, but it is set up differently. And Slushies, just to remind you, and noobs, go to the site, pbqmag.org, click on podcast, and you can read these. See how they do sit on the page. So this is another letter, but the other letter was one big long piece, and this is separated into stanzas. All right, here we go. Dear Caitlyn Jenner, you say, there's more to being a woman than hair and makeup. What? Swaying walk, tender heart? My wife likes polish now and then. A woman who's never worn pink or a push-up bra. In the pool, scarlet toes make me look twice. The color glints like blood. I look and look again as when I eye your shift from Bruce to Kate, your lifelong dream lived late. I will be able to live authentically as female, but I've missed so much. Authentic, from one's own authority. It's quite a dream to have a body that does not get in the way of who we are. I cleaned the whole closet out. The boys' stuff is gone. You wear your heart. Let arrows pierce it. My methods blending in. No gazing in the glass. And as I age, I'm ever more invisible. Still, it's a different thing to take down womanhood instead of build it from scratch. A line drawn in the dirt on which the fairness of the race depends. I'd like to start anew. I'm a crumbling bridge between who I am and what I like. Here, take my skirts and tights, the teal, the olive, and lavender. Take the scarves, my pillows, and my lumps, batter that rises up and over the tin. Really, I wouldn't mind losing the breasts. Their squish, their sag and flop. But what would balance skillet-wide hips and buttocks round as cabbages? I'd shrink those too. I'd choose a boy's narrow pelvis, flat chest, muscled. Yours before, come to think of it. Note, we both say boy, youth and power in every move. I don't have to justify. When every body's a field of claim, differences aren't small. I know the itch to float, to choose my sex and who I love as I choose clothes. Each day, a palette or a lump of clay. You want to be yourself, get dressed, get ready to go out and just be like a normal person. I take for granted what you've never had. Fairness depends on where we start. I'll see you at the finish line.
Ah, great reading.
Good reading.
Great words.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I'm a crumbling bridge between who I am and what I like.
Mm-hmm.
I got arm hairs, you guys. I could barely read on.
I know.
If I was reading alone to myself, I would have just stayed there for several beats.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
But then and look at that, the sort of optimism and heartbreak, right? Of I'd like to start anew, right? Like there's like a, I don't know, like ambition and woundedness in it. I'd like to start anew. I'm a crumbling bridge between who I am and what I like. Oh, it's good. Good.
Listeners, I don't know how good of a job I did. It was hard, and I don't think I did a very good job. There are italics here that appear to me to be quotes that are Caitlyn Jenner's.
Yeah.
So when you do look at the poem, I suggest you look to see when that separate voice was there. I tried a bit, but I don't know how well it came over.
So I want to look at the first stanza too. Because there's the second to last line of the first stanza is really interesting to me, because of its like propulsiveness and shift and I did use that word on purpose.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. Like I look and look again as, talking about toenail polish, right? I look and look again as when I eye your shift, and shift at that moment in my mind means attire, dress.
Oh, really?
Fashion. As when I eye your fashion.
Yeah.
And then the next line is shift. Well, like the last word is shift, line break from Bruce to Kate. And now it's like, oh, no, shift never meant like fashion. It means this reinvention of the self.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is kind of cool. And when I say it's propulsive, because then it pushes you into the poem, like 100%, you're much deeper into this contemplation about identity. Which is another way of saying, and I'll be really frank about this, I'm not quite sure about the pace or the way the first stanza is working. Like it's pointing at toenail polish, pointing at the wife, right? And it's a little bit slow to kick into the project of the poem, but it's also delightful to see that shift, right? Just watch it turn right into what it's contemplating.
I mean, I love the pieces about her own body, about the speaker's body, but then I don't know, the Jenner is such a fraught figure, and in a lot of ways, a kind of, I don't know. I mean, how do you like with Utah? I had a much clearer sense of like, kind of the conversation that she was in with Utah. And here I like the subtlety of the kind of like, of the sort of like, what does it mean to have a body? Like, I love, like, what does it mean to have a body that doesn't get in the way? But then there's a way in which like the Caitlyn Jenner is a kind of, cipher or a kind of, I don't know. I mean, do you read it as kind of, I mean, ever since Caitlyn Jenner spoke at the Republican National Convention in favor of Trump, I've been like,
Right. I think we bring a lot of baggage to Caitlyn Jenner.
Yeah, like I feel like I'm having a much harder time sorting my baggage and sort of like trying to sort like.
But
I mean, there's that dust up over. I mean, I don't know if you followed I mean, there was an article in Hypatia, a feminist journal, that like was accused of like just using Bruce Jenner in some circles is seen as dead naming a trans woman, and is like, will get, people get up in arms, and other people are like, well, Caitlyn Jenner uses Bruce Jenner herself when she like talks about her life prior to transition. So I don't know, like, I mean, I was having a really hard time sort of pulling myself out of a lot of I think I'm having a really hard time reading like sort of poetically, and I'm sort of like I know I was getting a little political in the last poem, and then I'm sort of like getting even sort of like more stuck here, if that makes sense.
Totally.
I really feel though that the poet is using Caitlyn Jenner to talk about her own relationship with herself, for sure. Right. So,
yeah.
So why, let's talk about that. Why such a controversial, huge figure as Caitlyn Jenner, right? That people are very opinionated about, have strong feelings about, I think, even those who don't really follow any of the stories, right? Don't you think?
Right. Well, she became the stand-in for transgender identity in American consciousness.
Right.
And so even though people like Kate Bornstein and Candace Cain and people who've had like really complex and interesting engagements with what gender is, with what transgender is, with how to understand, with how to be respectful, suddenly you kind of get this person who shows up, takes up all the air in the room. I don't know if you saw, like, I only watched one episode of I Am Kate, but there's an episode where they basically have like 12 trans women icons on a bus with Kate, trying to talk to her about trans history, about trans politics, about trans theory, about sort of everything complicated, difficult, and historical. And she's just like, oh, that's silly. And they're like, oh. You have like Kate Bornstein just sort of like being like, oh my God. And yet this person has kind of become the one trans woman that everyone in the United States knows.
Well, oddly, you've just articulated the project of the poem kind of beautifully, right? Which is that, as you said, Caitlyn Jenner's cipher, right, in it, right? So she's the stand-in, right, for the debate, right? Stand-in for the complexities around the issue.
Right.
And I just want to flag up the way context is working here too, right? Which is to say, right now, Caitlyn Jenner she's a loaded symbol, so to speak, right? But not to sound too lofty or pretentious, like in 20 years, is anybody, I mean, maybe we'll remember the name Caitlyn Jenner, but will it have the weight of history, or is it just going to be like a flash of the pop cultural conversation? And I say that also because, in a way, Dear Utah is addressing Utah, right? Is homosexuality contagious? Again, these are like, it's making pop culture references, but it's not fully relying on a popular cultural icon in order to structure itself. But when I read this poem, it's like, even if I didn't know the story of Caitlyn Jenner, this is a poem about envy, right? And desire for desire, or desire for the potential to transition, reinvent, right?
Yeah. I kind of feel like she's a little more ruminative than that.
Yeah.
She's just, and by she, I'm saying the speaker. The speaker of the poem is just thinking about these issues. If I could, would I?
Yeah.
You know?
But I mean, I think that's kind of for me, that's where I sort of run into trouble, because if Jenner becomes the stand-in for trans identity, like, how is a trans reader going to experience this poem when it's like, oh, if I could switch, I'd do that. You know, like, if it's right, like, I feel like there's a very much a way in like the Utah and the is homosexuality contagious kind of come from an inside, whereas this sort of feels like a little bit more of an outside, where it sort of flirts with a kind of set of possibilities that are not consequential, whereas the other ones kind of deal with possibilities that are incredibly consequential. Does that make sense?
I think Joe wants to say something. Did you, Joe? Or did you lose that?
Well, I really, this entire discussion I've been thinking about, when I saw this title, I really was cringing that this is going to be a very turf-oriented poem, but it turned out to be the opposite. I think Caitlyn Jenner as a cipher, this poem is sort of an ode to, hey, people that might identify as turf right now, you probably should see it a different way. And that's what I kind of feel that this poem is trying to do. And it's really powerful. Because, Caitlyn Jenner is a divisive figure because she does not sort of represent everything good about, like, it's a multimodal type of person. But this poem really is like, hey, you know what? Trans is fine, and stop being dumb.
Thank you.
That's how I read it.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
I do love the ending.
No, it brought me to tears, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
And the phrasing is wonderful.
Yeah. I think we should vote, y'all.
All right.
Okay.
What do you think? Let's do it.
Well, I know I'm voting, so I'm ready to vote.
I call it.
Ready. All right. 1, 2, 3, vote.
Yeah.
Bang. 3 for 3.
All right. Great.
Thank you so much, Natasha, for sending these to us.
Yes. Wow. What a great batch of poems. And a great conversation, as ever.
Yeah.
As always.
My faithful friends. And Joe, thanks for that, man. It's great to hear your voice.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I usually try not to jump on too much, but this set of poems is really powerful. So
here.
Great job.
Yes. Yeah. All right, Slushies. Happy 2020. Yeah. We're off.
What else? Did we want to have any other words? We're not really at an hour, we're only at about 40 some minutes.
That's cool.
I don't know. Do you guys have news? Do you have like fun things happening?
Oh, we're going to go to a writing retreat this weekend.
Oh.
KVM and I are going upstate with some friends from NYU's expository writing program. they're fantastic poets and essayists and novelists, and we're all going to gather in a place near Poughkeepsie. So the writing will happen.
This big house. And I looked at the weather. It's going to be 30 degrees.
It might snow,
which is good because then we can hunker in the house. Like I'm glad we won't be going anywhere, and we're just going to be there. And we haven't had much winter yet, so it'll be winter for a few days.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you remember, like the zombie apocalypse of summer when it was how hot was it in Philadelphia?
Oh God!
That day we came down for the podcast festival.
God, that really was soup. The outside was soup.
Because people are wearing shorts in New York and it's January.
I know.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. So I'm having like a little like apocalypse panic.
Oh, well, hey, not to make you panic further, but has anybody honked? Is your car okay?
Oh, no, I'm fine.
Okay, good. And how about you, Jason? Any news? Anything to tell us about the book coming up or?
Yeah, I'm setting up readings. I'm really excited. I have some stuff in LA and some stuff in Pittsburgh. And the book will be out in May, so everyone can pre-order. You can actually pre-order it now from Red Hen.
Oh, perfect.
Hold Me Tight. Yeah, just go to the Red Hen website, Hold Me Tight by Jason Schneiderman. It's right there. You can get a copy.
Yeah.
And I just taught my first residency at Warren Wilson, the graduate program, which was amazing. I just had a really great experience. It was a really intense 10 days, and those students worked so hard.
That's great.
It was so intense and impactful, but I was so happy and I felt so lucky to be there. And it was just really, so everything coming up roses for me.
Fantastic.
Wonderful. Yay.
Fantastic. So I can't wait to read Hold Me Tight. I'm super stoked. And yay, Red Hen Press.
Yeah, I'm excited to still spend some time with Marion, and that's it. I think
have you guys booked all your travel for AWP?
Oh, not yet.
Hotel, no flights. Yeah,
we're gonna get that sorted in the next couple of days too.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Much love to you, Jason. Much love to our slushies.
Yeah.
Let us know how we're doing and keep reading.
Woo-hoo!
Okay. Love you guys.
Love you.
I was wondering if that would come.
What a perfect song.
Perfect.
Yay! That was great.
Sorry, you guys got me today. So
Yeah. As it should
It was
be.
really, really, really great.
Good stuff. Really good stuff. All right.